When your wife of 23 years is cheating, you become a detective against your will. The late nights, password-protected phone, designer lingerie you never see. Charlotte thought I was oblivious while she planned her exit with her younger financial advisor. What she didn't know, I was 2 steps ahead. The moment she said, "I'm leaving you over dinner," I smiled. The look on her face when the door opened was priceless. After months of betrayal, watching her perfect plan collapse was worth every second of heartache. My name is William Mitchell. I'm 56 years old, and for 23 years, I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, what marriage is, but good enough that I never imagined I'd be where I am today. I've been the regional sales director at Meridian Pharmaceuticals for nearly 15 years, built a decent life, nice house in the suburbs of Cincinnati. The American dream, right? Wrong. Charlotte and I met at a conference in Boston. She was smart, beautiful, and had this laugh that could light up a room. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot in a small ceremony in her hometown. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always found a way to work through things, or so I believed. Then about 8 months ago, things began to change. It was subtle at first. Charlotte stopped asking about my day. The little text she used to send, just checking in, sharing some stupid joke, or planning dinner, they dried up. When I'd get home, instead of greeting me with a kiss, she'd barely look up from her phone. "Everything okay?" I'd ask, loosening my tie after a long day. "Fine," she'd say, that universal female response that means absolutely nothing. I chalked it up to stress at her job. The insurance company she worked for was going through some restructuring, and she'd mentioned there was pressure to meet new sales quotas. I tried to be understanding, give her space. That's what a good husband does, right? Then came the late nights. Once, maybe twice a week at first, she'd text saying she was working late or grabbing drinks with colleagues. I didn't think much of it. We'd been married long enough that I wasn't keeping tabs on her every move. But when those late nights became 3, sometimes 4 times a week, that little voice in my head started whispering. When I'd ask who she was with, her answers got vague. Just people from work, or nobody important. One night, after she'd come home smelling like wine and wearing more makeup than she'd had on that morning, I pressed harder. "Who exactly were you out with tonight?" She rolled her eyes, sighing like I was bothering her. "Just some work friends, Will." Why the 3rd degree? That was new. Charlotte never used to be this dismissive. The woman I married would tell me every detail about her day, sometimes more than I care to hear. Now, I was lucky if I got more than a one-word answer. Then came the phone. It never left her side. In the bathroom, phone went with her. Getting a glass of water, phone in hand. At night, I'd see the glow of the screen illuminating her face as she texted someone. When I asked who she was messaging so late, she'd snap. "Just a friend." "Why are you so nosy lately?" I wasn't being nosy. I was noticing changes in the woman I'd spent over 2 decades with. And somewhere deep down I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit to myself. I've always prided myself on being a rational man. In pharmaceutical sales, you learn to read people, to sense when someone's feeding you a line. It's a skill that's served me well in business. Not so much in my marriage, apparently. The Charlotte I knew was becoming a stranger in our home. Her business casual attire gradually transformed into more stylish outfits. New dresses, higher heels, more makeup. When I complimented her one morning, she barely acknowledged it. "You look nice today." "Special meeting." "Just trying to look professional," she answered, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She'd never been vain before. Now she was constantly preening, checking herself in every reflective surface. My suspicions deepened when she started changing her perfume. For 15 years, she'd worn the same scent I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. Now suddenly it was too predictable, and she was trying new fragrances weekly. One night, I was paying her credit card bill when I noticed several charges from a lingerie boutique downtown. Expensive stuff, not the practical items she usually bought. I couldn't remember the last time she'd worn anything like that for me. "Did you go shopping at La Belle recently?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She froze for just a second, then recovered. "Oh, just picking up some things. My old stuff is getting worn out." Funny how I'd never seen any of these new purchases. Then came the gym membership. Charlotte had never been particularly athletic. We'd occasionally walk the neighborhood together on weekends, but that was about it. Now suddenly she was hitting the gym 3 times a week, sometimes at odd hours. "Since when are you so interested in fitness?" I asked one evening as she packed her gym bag. A woman my age needs to stay in shape, Will. You should try it sometime, she said, glancing at my slight middle-age spread. That stung. In 23 years, she'd never made a negative comment about my appearance. I tried to shake these thoughts, telling myself I was being paranoid. But one evening, Jerry Porter, my neighbor and longtime drinking buddy, stopped by unannounced. We hadn't hung out properly in months, so I invited him in for a beer. You've been scarce lately, I said, handing him a cold one. Yeah, work's been crazy. He seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. How are things with you and Charlotte? Something in his tone made me pause. Fine. Why do you ask? He took a long swig of beer, then stared at the bottle. No reason. Just checking in. As he was leaving, he hesitated at the door. Listen, Will, you're a good friend. If you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here, okay? That night, I couldn't sleep. Jerry knew something. I was sure of it. The confirmation came a few days later. I was having lunch at Riverside Grill, a place Charlotte and I used to frequent. I was sitting on the patio when I saw Martin Lewis, one of Charlotte's colleagues, at a table inside. I was about to go say hello when he was joined by a tall, well-dressed man I didn't recognize. I overheard snippets of their conversation. Charlotte seems really happy lately. Connor's been good for her. Never seen her like this before. Connor? Who the hell was Connor? In all our recent conversations, Charlotte had never once mentioned anyone named Connor. My stomach tightened. I paid my bill and left without finishing my lunch. On the drive back to the office, my mind was racing. There could be innocent explanations. Maybe this Connor was a new boss, a client, a mentor. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I pulled into the office parking lot, but couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do. I could confront Charlotte directly, but what if I was wrong? What if there was an explanation, and I came off looking like a jealous, controlling husband? No, I needed more information. I needed to be certain before I made my next move. And to do that, I needed to find out exactly who this Connor was and what he meant to my wife. They say bad news never comes at a convenient time. For me, it arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was preparing for the biggest presentation of the quarter. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike Dawson, a sales rep who worked under me and had become something of a friend over the years. Need to talk. Important. Can you meet after work? There was an urgency in those few words that made my stomach drop. I texted back that I'd meet him at O'Malley's, a quiet bar a few miles from the office where the pharmaceutical crowd rarely ventured. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions, reviewing slides and forecast numbers, but my mind kept circling back to that text. By the time I pulled into O'Malley's parking lot, my nerves were shot. Mike was already there, nursing a whiskey at the corner table. One look at his face, and I knew this wasn't about work. Thanks for coming, Will, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. What's going on, Mike? I ordered a bourbon neat. He took a deep breath. Look, I don't want to be this guy. I really don't. But if it were me, I'd want to know. My hand tightened around the glass. Know what? I saw Charlotte yesterday. At the Grand Hotel downtown. He paused. She wasn't alone. The Grand Hotel was one of the most expensive hotels in Cincinnati, known for its discretion and luxury. I felt my chest constrict. Who was she with? A guy. Tall, younger, well-dressed. They were. Mike looked down at his drink. They looked very comfortable together. Intimate. They went upstairs together. I sat motionless, letting the information sink in. You're sure it was Charlotte? Mike nodded grimly. 100%. I was there for a meeting with Westridge Pharma. They were at the bar. I don't think she saw me. I downed my bourbon in one swallow, welcoming the burn. Did you get his name? No, but I heard the bartender call him Connor. Connor. The same name I'd overheard at the restaurant. This wasn't a coincidence. I'm sorry, Will. I debated whether to tell you. But you've always been straight with me, and I felt you deserve the same. I thank Mike, though part of me wanted to shoot the messenger. We finished our drinks in silence, and I drove home on autopilot, my mind a battlefield of denial and rage. At home, Charlotte was busy preparing dinner, humming to herself. She looked up when I entered, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear, before she masked it with a smile. You're home early, she said, turning back to the stove. I watched her, this woman I'd loved for over 2 decades, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. How could she stand there, acting so normal, when she'd been with another man just yesterday? But I said nothing. Not yet. I needed more than secondhand information. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Rough day, I muttered, heading to the shower where she wouldn't see the storm in my eyes. Under the hot water, I made a decision. This wasn't coming out of nowhere. I want to believe Mike was wrong, but deep down, I already knew he wasn't. I've never been the jealous type. Ask anyone who knows me. But there's a difference between jealousy and knowing when you're being played for a fool. After Mike's bombshell, I felt like I'd been sucker punched. I needed hard evidence, something Charlotte couldn't just explain away with her silver tongue. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye like everything was hunky-dory, watching her eyes for any sign of guilt. Nothing. The woman had ice in her veins. At work, I couldn't focus worth a damn. I kept seeing Charlotte with this Connor character, imagining their hotel rendezvous. It was driving me up the wall. Around lunch, I made a decision. If the mountain won't come to Muhammad, I call my assistant. Janet, clear my afternoon. Family emergency. I drove downtown to the Grand Hotel, a place Charlotte and I had stayed for our 20th anniversary. Ironic, right? I walked in like I owned the place, straight to the bar where Mike had spotted them. Afternoon, sir. What can I get you? The bartender was young, professionally friendly. Bourbon neat. I settled onto a stool. You work here often? 5 years now. I pulled out my phone, found a recent picture of Charlotte, and slid it across the bar. My wife. She mentioned meeting a colleague here recently. A guy named Connor. I'm supposed to follow up with him on something, but she didn't give me his last name. The bartender glanced at the picture, then at me. For a second, I thought he'd tell me to pound sand. Instead, he nodded slowly. Mrs. Mitchell. Yeah, she comes in with Mr. Daniels sometimes. Connor Daniels. My stomach dropped to my shoes. So it wasn't a one-off. Sometimes, a couple times a month, last few months. They usually have a drink, then head upstairs. He must have seen something in my face because he added quickly. I'm not sure that's who she meant, though. No, that's him, I managed to say. You know what he does? For work, I mean. Financial consultant, I think. Has a corner office in the Riverview building down the street. He slid a napkin under my drink. Look, man, I shouldn't be running my mouth. We value our guests' privacy here. Translation. He'd figured out I wasn't just a clueless husband following up on business. I tipped him generously and left. In my car, I sat staring at the Riverview building 2 blocks away. Connor Daniels, financial consultant. Now I had a name and profession. A quick Google search on my phone gave me the rest. Connor Daniels, 38, senior consultant at Brighton Financial. His company photo showed a square-jawed, Kindle type with perfect hair and a 1,000-watt smile. Younger than me by almost 20 years. Figured. I had half a mind to march into his office and confront him then and there. But what would that accomplish? I'd look like a crazy old man, and Charlotte would know I was onto her. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I had a name. I had a pattern. Now I needed undeniable proof, something so clear-cut that Charlotte couldn't spin her way out of it. They say if you want something done right, do it yourself. After 23 years of marriage, I wasn't about to take someone else's word on Charlotte's infidelity, even with all the signs staring me in the face. I needed to see it with my own 2 eyes. So there I was, a 56-year-old pharmaceutical sales director, sitting in my Lexus outside Brighton Financial like some 2-bit detective from a cable TV show. Rock bottom? You bet. But I was past caring. I'd called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Told my boss I had a stomach bug. In a way, it wasn't a complete lie. I was sick of being taken for a ride by the woman I'd built a life with. Connor Daniels emerged from the building around noon. Even from a distance, I could see why Charlotte might be attracted to him. Tall, athletic build, expensive suit. The kind of guy who probably had a standing appointment with a personal trainer and never had to worry about his cholesterol. I followed him at a distance, feeling like a complete idiot, but pressing on anyway. He went to a high-end deli, bought lunch, then walked back to his office. Nothing suspicious there. But at 4:30, he packed up and left again. This time, he drove to the Grand Hotel. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I parked and waited, not sure what my next move should be. 20 minutes later, Charlotte's Audi pulled into the lot. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me still hoped there was an explanation. Maybe he was her financial advisor. Maybe she was planning a surprise investment for our anniversary. Yeah, right. and maybe I'd win the lottery tomorrow. She walked into the hotel with purpose, not even glancing around. She'd done this before, many times, judging by her confidence. I slipped in after her, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice me. In the lobby, I spotted her heading straight for the elevator. Connor was waiting for her, holding the door. The look they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a business meeting. The way his hand rested on the small of her back as they entered the elevator, the intimate smile she gave him, it was the look of lovers, not colleagues. I felt like I'd been gut-punched. Even with all the evidence, I'd held on to a shred of hope that there was a misunderstanding. Now, that hope was dead. I didn't follow them upstairs. I didn't need to see any more. Instead, I went to the hotel bar and ordered a double scotch neat. The same bartender from yesterday gave me a knowing look, but said nothing. I sat there for an hour, nursing my drink, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. Had I been such a terrible husband? Had I missed signs that Charlotte was unhappy? Or was this just who she was? Someone capable of living a double life without remorse. By the time I left the hotel, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront Charlotte yet. That would just lead to denials, gaslighting, or worse, her trying to salvage our marriage out of guilt or convenience. I needed to be smart about my next move. I took out my phone and snapped several pictures of her car in the hotel parking lot. Then I sent a text to my lawyer. Howard, need to meet ASAP. It's about Charlotte. I met Howard for breakfast at a diner far from our usual spots. Didn't need word getting back to Charlotte that I was huddled with my attorney on a Thursday morning. Howard had been my lawyer for 15 years and my poker buddy for 10. He didn't beat around the bush. Jesus, Will, these are pretty damning. He scrolled through the photos on my phone. Charlotte entering the hotel, Connor greeting her, his hand on her back. Yeah, well, that's just the highlight reel. My coffee tasted like battery acid, but I gulped it down anyway. How long has this been going on? Few months, best I can tell. Maybe longer. The thought made me want to put my fist through a wall. Howard nodded, his expression grim. What do you want to do? Divorce her. No question. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. A year ago, the idea would have been unthinkable. Now was the only path forward. We spent the next hour discussing strategy, finances, the house, what to expect. Charlotte and I didn't have kids, thank God, but we had substantial assets that would need dividing. Howard advised me to start gathering financial documents before tipping my hand. Don't let on that you know anything, he warned. The element of surprise works in your favor. After we parted ways, I drove to the office on autopilot, my mind 1,000 miles away. I was pulling into the parking lot when my phone rang. Unknown number. William Mitchell. I answered, professional out of habit. Will, it's Olivia Bennett. I almost dropped the phone. Olivia was Charlotte's best friend since college. They had lunch every other Saturday, took spa weekends together twice a year. Why on earth would she be calling me directly? Olivia. This is unexpected. I know. Look, I don't have much time. Charlotte thinks I'm at a client meeting. Olivia owned a small organic grocery that Charlotte frequented. We need to talk. In person. It's important. My paranoia kicked into high gear. Was this a trap? Had Charlotte figured out I was onto her and sent Olivia to gather intelligence? What about? I asked cautiously. A pause. About Charlotte. And Connor Daniels. And some other things you should know. My heart skipped a beat. When and where? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town that afternoon. I spent the intervening hours cycling through scenarios. Maybe Olivia wanted to defend Charlotte. Maybe she was going to beg me to forgive her friend. Or maybe, and this seemed most likely, she was doing Charlotte's dirty work, feeling me out to see what I knew. I arrived early, scanning the place for signs of setup. Olivia walked in 10 minutes later, looking nervous. She spotted me and made her way over, sliding into the booth. Thanks for meeting me. She fiddled with a sugar packet, not meeting my eyes. What's this about, Olivia? She took a deep breath. Charlotte's been lying to you. To everyone. Including me. I'm aware of her extracurricular activities. My voice was harder than I intended. Olivia looked up, her eyes surprisingly fierce. It's worse than you think, Will. She's planning to leave you. Soon. She's already consulted a divorce attorney. She's going to try to take you for everything she can. I sat back, stunned. I'd expected to blindside Charlotte with divorce papers. Apparently, she'd had the same idea for me. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Olivia's eyes welled with tears. Because what she's doing is wrong. Because you don't deserve this. And because... She hesitated. Charlotte hasn't just betrayed you. She betrayed me too. Coffee with Olivia turned into dinner. We moved from the cafe to a small bistro downtown, sharing stories, comparing notes about Charlotte's deception. The more we talked, the clearer the picture became. Charlotte had been manipulating us both for months. She told me you two were essentially separated, Olivia said, twirling pasta around her fork. That you were staying together for appearances, but had an understanding. I nearly choked on my wine. An understanding? That's what she calls lying to my face every day. I should have questioned it more. I'm sorry, Will. As the evening progressed, I found myself seeing Olivia in a new light. We'd known each other for years, but always as Charlotte's friend, not as her own person. She was smart, funny, direct. Everything Charlotte had once been before she turned into a stranger. 2 bottles of wine in, Olivia confessed something that floored me. Charlotte tried to set me up with Connor once. Before they got involved. Said he was perfect for me. She laughed bitterly. Now I realized she was just testing the waters, seeing if I found him attractive. That's twisted, I muttered. That's Charlotte, she countered. When I walked her to her car, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the shared sense of betrayal, or maybe it was just the wine, but I found myself reluctant to say goodnight. This was unexpected, I said, hands in my pockets like a nervous teenager. But not unwelcome. She held my gaze, challenging. I surprised myself by leaning in and kissing her. Even more surprising, she kissed me back. We pulled apart, both slightly stunned. Well, she said softly. Too soon? I asked, suddenly uncertain. For some people, maybe. But we're not the ones who broke our vows, are we? Over the next week, Olivia and I met several times. What started as commiseration evolved in a genuine connection. It felt like poetic justice, finding companionship with the person Charlotte had unwittingly brought into the center of her deception. Meanwhile, I followed Howard's advice, gathering financial documents, securing my assets, preparing for the storm to come. Charlotte remained oblivious, still playing the role of devoted wife while secretly planning her exit strategy. Little did she know, I was 2 steps ahead of her with an unexpected ally by my side. 3 weeks after discovering Charlotte's affair, I was ready to make my move. Howard had prepared all the necessary paperwork. My finances were secured, and I had a solid exit strategy. All that remained was the confrontation itself. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked as we finalized the details of our plan. We were at her place, a cozy bungalow that had become my sanctuary from the facade of my marriage. Never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied, squeezing her hand. What had started as mutual comfort had blossomed into something neither of us expected. Something genuine and honest, the polar opposite of what I had with Charlotte. The plan was simple but effective. I'd invite Charlotte to dinner at Riverside, the upscale restaurant where we'd celebrated our 20th anniversary. Public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for what needed to be said. What if she doesn't show? Olivia worried. She'll show, I said confidently. I'll tell her I want to discuss our future. She'll think it's her chance to control the narrative, to break the news on her terms. That evening, I called Charlotte and suggested dinner the following night. We need to talk about some things, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Actually, I've been wanting to talk to you too, she replied, a hint of rehearsed concern in her voice. I could almost see her mental calculation, figuring this was her opportunity to drop the bomb, to tell me about wanting space, or needing to find herself, or whatever line she'd prepared to justify leaving me for Connor. Great, I said. Reservations at 8. The next day crawled by. I left work early, went home to change, and texted Olivia to confirm she was ready. The butterflies in my stomach weren't from fear, but anticipation. For months, Charlotte had been calling the shots, manipulating the game. Tonight, the tables would turn. I arrived at Riverside 15 minutes early and requested a specific table, corner booth, good sight lines to the entrance. The maitre d' knew me as a regular and obliged without question. At precisely 8, Charlotte arrived, looking polished and composed. She dressed up, wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her for our anniversary, a nice touch for her performance as the reluctant heartbreaker. You look nice, I commented as she slid into the booth. Thanks. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those calculating eyes that had once looked at me with love, now just measuring how best to end our marriage while maximizing her gains. If only she knew what was coming. Dinner started smoothly enough. We ordered our usual, filet for me, salmon for Charlotte. Made small talk about work, the weather, an upcoming charity gala. Anyone watching would have thought we were just another middle-aged couple enjoying a night out. If only they knew. Halfway through the main course, Charlotte set down her fork and took a deliberate sip of wine. I recognized the gesture. She was preparing to deliver a rehearsed speech. "Will, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she began, her voice carefully modulated to convey reluctant sadness. "About us. About our marriage." I nodded, playing along. "I've been thinking too." She continued as if I hadn't spoken. "We've been together a long time, and I'll always care about you. But people change, and sometimes they grow apart." I watched her performance with detached fascination. The slight tremor in her voice, the practiced way she avoided eye contact. She planned this down to the smallest detail. "What I'm trying to say is..." She took another fortifying sip of wine. "I think we should separate. I need space to figure out what I really want." There it was. The bomb dropped. I waited for her to continue, to see how deep this rabbit hole of lies went. "It's not about anyone else," she added quickly. "This is about me needing to rediscover who I am." I couldn't help it, I laughed. A short, sharp bark that made her flinch. "What's funny?" Her composure cracked slightly. "Connor Daniels," I said simply. "Room 414 at the Grand Hotel. Usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes on weekends when I'm at conferences." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're..." "Save it, Charlotte. I've known for weeks. I have photos, witness statements, hotel receipts." I pulled out my phone, slid it across the table, showing a picture of her entering the hotel with Connor. "You've been spying on me?" Her shock morphed to indignation. The classic cheater's deflection. "No, I've been uncovering the truth while you've been lying to my face. It's not what you think." At dinner, my wife said, "I'm leaving you." I smiled as her face dropped as I walked in. Olivia approached our table, poised and calm. Charlotte's eyes widened in horror. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" "Supporting Will," she said, sliding into the booth beside me. "Someone should." "You and..." "Olivia." Charlotte's voice quavered between shock and indignation. Her eyes darted between us, searching for signs of sick joke. "Surprise," Olivia said calmly, settling into the booth. "Seems we both outgrew you." Charlotte's face flushed with anger. "So, this whole dinner was just to humiliate me? Real mature, Will." "No, this dinner was to make sure you knew the game was over. I'm not the clueless husband you can manipulate anymore." I slid a folder across the table. "Divorce papers. Already filed. My lawyer has all the evidence of your affair, so I wouldn't recommend contesting the terms." Charlotte flipped through the documents, her expression shifting from outrage to calculation. Always calculating, that was Charlotte. "You think a judge will care about my affair when they see you moved on to my best friend?" She tried for a triumphant smirk, but it faltered. "Ex-best friend," Olivia corrected. "And we started seeing each other after I found out you'd been using me as cover for your affair. After you lied to my face for months." Charlotte's composure finally cracked. "This was your plan all along, wasn't it? To steal my husband?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You're unbelievable. You've been cheating for months, planning to blindside me with divorce. And somehow you're the victim." The restaurant manager approached, sensing tension. "Everything all right here?" "Just peachy," I replied, standing. "We were just leaving." Outside, the summer air felt cleaner somehow, as if a storm had broken. Charlotte had stormed off in a taxi, leaving us standing under the restaurant awning. "Well, that went about as expected," Olivia said, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "No, it went better," I replied. "For months she's been in control, pulling all the strings. Tonight, she finally realized she wasn't as clever as she thought." The divorce proceedings weren't pretty. Charlotte fought for everything she could get, painting herself as the wronged wife whose husband had strayed with her best friend. But the evidence spoke for itself. Hotel receipts, witness statements, bank records showing how she'd funded her affair with our joint account. 6 months later, it was done. 23 years of marriage dissolved by a judge's signature. People ask if I regret how things ended. I don't. Charlotte had checked out of our marriage long before I discovered her affair. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. As for Olivia and me, we're taking things slow, building something honest from the ashes of betrayal. Unlike Charlotte, we don't need lies or manipulation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but moving forward and finding happiness they can never touch.